Good morning and welcome to Race Industry Now, the weekly webinar series from ePower Trade, presented to you by ARP, Performance Plus Global Logistics, Peak, Ferrari Racing Components, and Fifth Third Banks Motorsport. I am Francisque Savignan, the founder and CEO of ePower Trade, the racing industry, every minute, every day. With me this morning are Judy Kin, the co-founder of ePower Trade, and wonderful host, Mr. Brad Gilly. We're going to be hosting Elgin Industries in a few seconds. So, Judy?
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We have some big news. Brad, this is news to you, too. We turned 6 years old, so happy birthday to us. And in these 6 years, in these 6 years, we have generated leads, created dealers, evolved, provided educational content, and with a dash of entertainment. So this platform works. So buyers out there, feel free to sign in, log in, and use it. Brad?
Awesome. Well, congratulations, first of all. This is just an amazing platform, and I know one that many, many people continue to benefit from every day, and it's a great resource to the entire industry. So that's really cool. All right. Well, let's just get started, Francis. Judy, we'll talk to you all again here shortly, and really appreciate that. Very much looking forward to today's webinar. The title is Camshaft and Lifters, Letdowns, Bombs, and Flops. And joining us is Scott Stier, the Aftermarket Sales and Technical Manager of Elgin Elgin Industries, I should say. Injury is probably what we're going to be talking about a little bit when it comes to motors and engines, Scott, for sure. But welcome. Hope you're doing well today. Great to have you back.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it is great to be here. And let me just say this. I am Fort Worth based, and I know a few weeks ago you guys were out at Texas Motor Speedway for LS Fest, which was a big, big fun thing. And while I didn't actually make it out inside for LS Fest, I was nearby and I could literally see on the big screen, which is like the world's largest TV, the commercial for Elgin Industries playing throughout the weekend, which was kind of a cool thing to see.
Yeah, we had a great time, and I understand that we have that commercial maybe queued up if everyone wants to see it.
Yeah, let's go ahead and play that now. Look, that's very exciting. And what we see there, Scott, obviously is performance. And we're going to be talking a lot about that and making sure that we don't have those injuries, those letdowns, those bombs, and those flops. I do want to remind anybody who's viewing today that if you have a question at any time throughout this presentation, please feel free to type it into the chat. We always treat this like we're at a trade show and we're talking one-on-one. And if you have a question about the things that we're here talking about today and what Elgin Industries has, well, we want to make sure that we answer those for you. So feel free to type them in. So, Scott, let's just get a quick overview of maybe a little more in-depth description of exactly what we're talking about here today.
Yeah, so I've been with Elgin for 6 years and 9 months. I do answer the tech line in addition to handling some sales and digital marketing. And we have been noticing an increase in phone calls for people that have questions about camshaft failures in general, whether it's on break-in or it's over time or it's the product that they're getting when they're opening up the box. So today I'd like to discuss what some of the answers that maybe aren't readily available to people, and maybe clear up some of the rumors, and then give you some cold hard facts to go along with that. So.
Oh, well, good. Well, which is fantastic. So if there's an increase in phone calls, does that necessarily mean that there is an increase in both failures of camshafts and lifters?
I think that there's a duality there, that there is both. We have noticed an uptick in failures, not to Elgin product, but failures in general. But to an extent, I think that a little bit of it comes from more communication amongst everyone within the industry and the hobby, depending on what end they're on.
When you say more communication, like there's a perception that there is, because we all know when people get on internet forums and we all start talking to each other, we talk about the things that go wrong and not necessarily always the things that go right.
Yeah, you're completely right. And I think that that is kind of probably playing like an old game of telephone, is that one person hears it, they pass it on to the next person, who passes it on to the next person, and before long, the rumor is there's nothing good out there, when in reality there's still a lot of good to be had. But there is some bad out there. It just needs to be clarified, as to whether the keyboard commandos have the experience to back it up, which is what I'm here to bring, is that I do have a lot of feedback from production engine remanufacturers and other types of machine shops and engine builders from around the world, and what we're hearing from them, and hopefully that there is some truth to it, that there is some failures, but there is also still a lot of obviously we're I'll say it again later, but we're in the golden age of horsepower right now. There's a lot of very fine product out there that's made to very fine tolerances, and we're getting the dollar to horsepower ratio is the best it's ever been, and we're seeing that with track times. We're seeing that in every form of motorsports, and interest in general, I think, is growing, in every sector and every different form of racing that Elgin is involved in, which is primarily domestic and et cetera. So
Yeah. So let me ask it in this way.
sure.
And I like to talk about this, especially when it comes to motorsports, because a lot of times in a race, you might say that this component failed, or this failed, or this failed. I actually sometimes look at it and say, well, so and so failed this part, meaning that, hey, maybe this part was designed to work within these tolerances, whatever it might be. Could be tires, could be internal engine components, or whatever. And then someone said, you know what? Well, if it's okay to go to here, maybe we'll take it to here and it should be fine, until it's not. Well, it's not the part that failed, it's the person that failed the part. How much of what we're seeing out there is maybe a little bit of that, as opposed to actual just parts problems?
That's always existed. Pushing the parameters is what has got us to where we are today. Elgin, we first started out racing in the Indy 500, where we were proving our parts on the track, all the way up till 1954. We even did the Pan American Road Race, which was at the time considered one of the most grueling races in the world. But slowly we learned that there's a lot more to be learned in a laboratory. So we invested a lot in that in our newest building, the one that I'm in right now, where we can test the parts in ways that can be measured repeatedly, versus on the racetrack, where there are different parameters in how the user installed it and whatnot. So a lot more math involved, which I'm not an engineer. I won't try to be one, and that's part of what I'm going to bring in the slide presentation, is that I'm not going to be speaking in very technical terms. I'm going to be taking what I've learned from the engineers and bringing it to more of a conversational level of the average user, a cruise night user, a guy in his 2-car garage, someone that has had a lifetime of experience, but might not be aware of all the topics that we cover here on ePartrade on a weekly basis. What the innovations that we've learned within the last decade, but specifically really since we've learned, I would say in the last 5 years, since we've kind of had a little bit of a shift in the market due to COVID. Less cars on the street, more time spent researching, trying to get that extra little bit out of that extra 1/10 of a second out of a lap or out of a pass in the quarter mile. So maybe I can help with a little of that. Hopefully I can clear up a lot of those questions today.
Awesome. Yeah. Look, we want to get maximum performance, and we want to make sure it continues to make run after run, race after race. All right. So let's talk about cams. Are there soft cams out there, Scott?
There's not as much soft cams as there is weak oil. So the strength of your oil has gotten soft, and that's something that people aren't largely aware of, is that they at one point, when the cars were new, when flat tappet cams were new, that the oil was designed to coat and protect the interface between the camshaft and the face of the lifter. But what they found was that the minerals, zinc, phosphate, ZDDP, whatever you want to call it, what they would coat the cam, coat and protect the camshaft, would coat the inside of the catalytic converter, not necessarily rendering it useless, but making it a lot less effective. So in the 90s, when the OEs were trying to get better emissions out of their vehicles, they decided that by rolling back the amount of zinc wasn't really affecting the performance of the camshaft because everyone was switching to a roller cam in OE production anyway. So it was a win-win for the OEs, but it was a big loss for all of us racers that were not aware of it. And 25 years ago, I was working in a machine shop, and we did experience some premature failures. I did have an engine that suffered some damage that we couldn't quite figure out. And that's when we started to have to ask around pre-internet, pre-EPAR trade, the industry was totally different. An actual physical trade show is where you would have to go to try to talk to people. You couldn't just bring it up. You couldn't Google this, and this video will eventually come up, about issues with camshaft failures. Because I did have a cam failure. And coincidentally, that screen from ARP, that commercial at the beginning, one of the very first ones, the screen where George Poteet himself is giving the interview, in the background is a Hurst, like Linda Vaughn, Hurst shifters, a Hurst Rambler Scrambler. And that's the car that I bought when I was 15 years old and I still own today. And that's the one that I raced and broke because of the oil. One of a couple of vehicles that I broke because of the oil. The other ones we'll talk about later. But yeah, the weak oil is a big issue, and running the correct amount of oil is something that I'll speak on a little bit. But there's a lot of other great videos that have been on this platform that can go into it in greater depth.
Oh, that is, first of all, that's really cool. Not that you broke the cam,
Yeah.
but the cars in the back, all of that stuff. All right. Well, let's talk about imported lifters as well. What about those?
So Elgin, we are a global supplier. We do source globally. We're a tier one. We supply Ford, Chrysler, and John Deere brand new parts every day that those trucks pick up from this facility to go to new engine assembly lines. But for aftermarket, some of this stuff is sourced from around the world. But everything that Elgin has is stuff that we feel confident we can put our warranty on. During when the COVID really ramped up, a lot of other retailers could not get lifters because we were only supplying the OEs. We did not have time to make aftermarket. They chose to fill in with an offshore lifter. We looked at those lifters that we could not put our warranty on them. So we opted to run out of lifters rather than fill in with a worse product. So several container loads of offshore lifters made it over here that were subpar to our quality standards. And 5 years later, there's still a lot out there right now. There's a lot of lifters that are not good, that are made out of the wrong materials, which I can get into later, that are not made to the right machining. They don't have the right heat treat for whatever reason. So yes, there are lifters out there that are very poor in quality, but not from Elgin. The Elgin lifters are all the ones that we will put our regular warranty on, that we have thoroughly inspected, that we are confident are going to be able to perform the same as the OE equivalent OE replacement that you're taking out of the engine right now.
So when you talk about this, is this and not to sort of get into the whole, internet scare thing that we see a lot of times, but is this ticking time bomb things are in people's engines right now? Or is this, you might want to push it, but boy, if you're pushing it too much, you probably want to make a change.
Yes, across the board. Countless examples. Probably the best one I can give for that would be the LS engine. The lifter guide itself is the offshore ones the physical measurements of it are identical to what you would see if coming from an OE or an Elgin OE equivalent replacement. But the plastic is made out of the wrong material, and it could fail in 200 miles. It could fail in 20,000 miles, but they are consistently failing. The lifter guide itself, the lifters, the AFM, DFM lifters, those are having an issue. Same kind of time frame for failures. For the flat tappets, there's a key alloy or a key component of the alloy that's meant to be for structural resilience that's missing. That once you bring the engine up to temperature, yeah, it is a ticking time bomb before it's going to fail. But that's something that, again, just looking for the right supplier, looking for something that's sourced domestically from a high quality company is going to solve a lot of that. So I hope that helps a little.
Yeah, no, it does. And Scott, I know you have some PowerPoint stuff that you want to show us as well, as we get into this a little bit more. And, one of the great things you and I were talking yesterday is that a lot of what we're talking about literally comes from the questions that you get every single day answering the tech line. So, we're sort of here to help consolidate stuff, but also I'm sure it's going to bring about a few more questions as well.
I'm hoping so. I mean, as people are listening, if they have any questions, I can field most of it. Again, I'm not an engineer and I'm not an engine builder, but somewhere in between, you know, I can. My job is to help. Is to not know the answer. It's to help you get to the correct answer and the most factual one possible. So I might not have the answer you want to hear, but I can give you an honest answer that will get you to that correct answer. So.
Awesome. Well, do you want to bring up your PowerPoint now and to get
Yeah, I'm ready. I can buzz through it. There's probably some stuff. So if you're ready, I'm ready.
Absolutely.
All right, let's try to share. Let's hit here. Share. Full screen. How's that look for you guys?
we can see it all. This is great.
Perfect. Okay. So here we are, opening up the screen. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Francique. Thank you, ePartrade. Good morning, good afternoon, good noon, good evening. Again, I am Scott Stier, 6 years, 9 months, 4th generation in the hobby and industry for the automobiles. Answering the tech line, and being that I'm 4th generation, in my travels, I can first have the chance to converse with OE engineers, production engineering manufacturers, lifetime machinists from every form of transportation known to man. And what I've learned from them, I'm here to share today, because over the phone, I get calls from all walks of life. And I can tell you there are a lot of end users, car owners that are not aware of the innovations that we've had in the last few years. So if there's 3 basic things that I want you to take away from this, it's that the oil has changed a lot. Your blocks are probably worn out, and that just filling in with a good quality OE product, such as from Elgin, where we were, as I said earlier, we do source globally. Not all of our parts are made here in this building, but we do put a warranty on all of them. So this video is kind of a quick guide, a checklist to make sure that your new engine will survive in these today in these conditions. So the pictures here, I mean, just to kind of help visualize it, this 55 Chevy, one of the icons of probably automobilia of all time across the world. The 55 Chevy and the small block Chevy both turn 70 years old at the end of the summer. You know, introduced in the fall of 54, that's 70 years ago. Over here, there's a 62 Cadillac, which might not look too old to a lot of people, but there's it's closer in year to this 1902 Cadillac than it is to today. And then just in general, all of these shiny muscle cars that you know, all of these cars that you see go through auctions and you see are bringing all this money today. At one point in time, it was a beater with a heater beaten on by a 16-year-old kid, and you don't know where it's been. You know, you don't know that engine is still halfway decent, you know, even though you put new parts in it, the engine itself might not be that great. So, and then of course here, again, Ford in the lower right-hand corner, our founder figured out how to centerless grind and how to heat treat piston pins for Model T Fords in 1919, and Ford is still our biggest customer today. 2 of our founders' grandchildren are still here every day running the business. Dollar-wise, Ford is our biggest customer. Volume-wise, it's Stellantis, which is now Chrysler, or former Chrysler. So these parts that you're getting from Elgin are OE Tier 1 supply quality. So you should be confident that you're getting a good part. You know, so it's not necessarily the parts. Elgin still makes the parts the way that everything used to be made. So maybe it's other issues that are bringing up questions as to what this increase in failures is. And a lot of what you're seeing here is the short answer that I have for is there an increase in failures is the metric that we're using today. It's new, it's fresh. We don't have that data before. We don't have that. The game of telephone before took a lot longer to happen versus getting on the computer and then getting bombarded by all this information, whether it's, you know, some of it is sadly, some of the companies out there they have sub-dealer networks that are armies of minions that are out there that are just trying to hawk a certain product for whatever reason. And it might not be the answer for what you need. And they might just say, well, use this bunch of parts, buy everything from me and it'll work. And then it doesn't work. And it's not their fault. It's not your fault. You know, whose fault is it? So as you can see, the stuff that I typed on the screen there, we're in the age of information, but we're also in, it's good and bad. We have a lot of good builds that are documented very well that you can copy. I tell that to people all the time when they say, well, if I want to build an engine, what should I look for? And I said, find a build that meets both your budget and your expectation, and then just clone it. Because more than likely, the people are going to be very happy to share that information with you. The middle one, me too. Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot more people have been admitting mishaps. When I was doing dirt track racing, it was a secret to not only how they were building the engines, but if someone blew something up, you would hear a rumor. Oh, did you hear last week they blew their engine up, but they got it back together within 1 week, or they had to scrape together the money to go, have it built or whatever. So that wasn't, now more people are admitting that they're having mishaps. And then the worst one, of course, is when you go to the store and you buy a toaster, you open it up, the first thing that you see is, if you have a problem with this product, call us directly. Do not return to the store. Well, okay, a toaster, yeah, you put bread in it, you plug it into the wall. A camshaft, there's like 40 different interfaces and tolerances that it needs to have in order for it to be correct. It's closer to surgery than it is to a toaster. So, you wouldn't trust a doctor to open you up without scoping you first. You shouldn't trust being able to swap out an engine part without measuring it first, without having a look, without making sure that all of the tolerances, that everything is looked at. So that's kind of to bring us into the topics that we're going to talk about today. So the first thing that most callers do stomp their feet about is, as we talked about before, the soft cams. No, it's not. There's the OEs. Let me back up. Elgin supplies the production engine remanufacturers. These aren't guys that are doing 30 engines a year or 30 engines a month. They're doing 30 engines a shift or more. And I've walked these lines. If we had a problem with camshafts and lifters, the same ones that are coming out of any box that leaves this building, they would be the first ones to tell us, because by volume, they're using a lot. Usually it's guys that call and they hear this old rumor, oh, I've heard there's a soft cam out there. No, it's the oil. And we'll get into more of that in a minute. That we've learned from the production engine remanufacturers, which of course the second and third items here on the screen are things that we're learning a lot about innovatively. You talk about the RVK of peaks and plateaus and valleys of oil retention, and you kind of know where I'm going with that. There's a lot that we've learned in the last few years about that, and a lot that the PERs can offer. And then of course we've already kind of touched on quality, beware of those offshore components. And then the only thing that's remained universal, the break-in. It's just got to be broken in correctly. And you got to tell the truth. We'll get to that in a minute, but if it's broken in correctly, all things considered, we are still in, this era of the automobile when we can keep these vehicles alive and keep competing, whether it's in, I believe that's Le Mans on the left, Monaco in the middle, and probably Laguna Seca. It's definitely 1970 Trans Am on the right. Parnelli Jones, rest in peace, right? In a school bus yellow Mustang that's front and center. And then the owner of Indy, Penske, he's on Donahue was probably driving or whatever, but some good cars there. That a lot of the calls that I answer are from guys that are trying to keep those on the road or had them on the road or whatever. So, which continues here is that the spectrum of what we're looking at from oil, the Indy car in the lower left-hand corner is could be operating on like a 0W8, which is something that's a topic, the zero grade oils versus the flathead in the upper right-hand corner. I know in my flathead Model T, when it's hot out in the summer and I got to go on a national event that's going to last a week, I will pour straight 40 into it just to keep it from knocking. That's a huge span of what you need oil-wise, to keep your engine alive. And what the engines were built for. So that Indy car is built to a much higher tolerance. Those dirt bikes, quite literally, different tolerance, different conditions. The muscle cars, which again is the one that we get the most calls about, the way that I try to remember it for that very popular 60s, 70s era car that there's a lot of people in two-car garages that are rebuilding. They need, the API service rating is probably the best way to look at it. That's how the oil is measured. As SJ is just right for flat tappet cams. SL, I think of as light, like a light beer. SM is maybe. SN is no. That's out. They took so much out by SN that that's when low speed pre-ignition was kind of coming to a head when the new cars were having the oil. It was like a thermonuclear chain reaction. It would catch fire between the piston rings, and it would melt the piston until it locked in the cylinder. So the oil companies had to run back to the drawing board and introduce SN Plus as an interim, and that put a little bit more in to kind of remedy that. And then now we're on SP. So the long story short is, by now, all of those different grades of oils, the modern oil that you pull off the shelf at your auto parts store is the equivalent of cooking oil to pour into your antique car, your flathead or your flat tap engine and lifters. So you can, if you for a time, you could use the ultra low sulfur or the Rotella had a good amount of zinc, but then they introduced more detergent, and the detergent will fight the zinc on a molecular level and it will win. So that's out completely. You can, worst case scenario, you can try to blend your own zinc into your base oil. And that's why Elgin, we offer a supplement, ZDDP-4, and we include the parts per million on the front of the bottle so that you can blend it back to that SJ API service rating, but you do still need to figure out what your parts per million is of the base oil you're adding it into, which is, that's, if you have to, definitely do that. If you can find a pre-blended oil, that's your best choice. Find a muscle car oil, a hot rod oil, a racing oil, off-road oil. Again, something that's designed for a vehicle pre-OBD1, something that's designed for a flat tappet cam is going to be your best bet for survival, because the detergent that's in the modern oils, as the bottom stuff kind of says here on the screen, the detergent will loosen up the sludge in the corners of the block. It'll find its way into places it can't get out of, and then the engine will just lock up or blow up, which is a terrible thing. So that's the quick, the long and the short on oil. On to engine blocks. So over the years, I've had the chance to speak with two different retired GM engineers from the Flint manufacturing plant, where the rumor was they made more V8s in one day than the rest of the world did in a week combined. And both of them confirmed that there was a very small percentage of engine blocks that left the factory mismachined, that weren't correct. A very, very, very small percentage, but based on the volume that they did, there's a lot of blocks that were very bad out there. And if it were in Grandma's Chevy Nova with a 2-barrel carb and 50 pounds of spring pressure, if it puked within the first 5,000 miles, the dealer would shove a new engine under it under warranty and send her down the road. But if the components managed to mate to the block, they could live a long and happy life until you go and you put a big performance cam in there with very high pressure springs, and suddenly you can't keep the engine to live. Well, maybe there's something that's mismachined about it, which is what we've learned about failure components from back to those production engine remanufacturers. So every block that they get in, every core that they get in, they strip it, hot tank it, magnaflux it, but before they start machining it, they put it into a coordinate scanner, and they get a 3D drawing of it, and they compare the 3D drawing of the core to the 3D drawing to an actual base file that they have of what an acceptable block is supposed to be. And what they're finding is there's more and more cores out there that are just, they're shot. And that's why some crate motor companies that Elgin supplies to all the valve train to brand new that don't have any issues with failures, don't have issues because they're making all of their old blocks brand new. They're making all of their heads brand new. All of their machining is perfect from day one. And that's something that someone in a 2-car garage it's going to be very labor intensive. You're going to have to make your own jigs and fixtures to be able to measure the interface of the camshaft, the lifters, and everything else for that matter. Core shift, whether or not all of the bores are straight. It's very time consuming, but it's very important, because back to the small block Chevy, 70 years old. A 70-year-old engine is just plumb worn out. I mean, it's seasoned. I mean, you could talk about, there's all different things you could talk about the engine changing over time. Even though it is metal, it is elastic. It's not, when you talk about stretch, we've talked about, we were just talking about the torque plates and stuff, and the effects that have through people like Cass Choate. He just had a really good one about showing a really quick video showing the measurement of how when you hone it, you're losing compression if you don't use the torque plates, which there's a lot of stuff that we're learning here on these platforms that are very relevant, from Ed Iskierdian, who's turns 103, I think, next month. Isn't that correct? His birthday is the day before mine in like 80 years or 60 years or something. Wow. All the way up through today to the high performance stuff. And then, where we've been all over the years is we have learned a lot. But over the years, those engines, they just, each time they get rebuilt, or, they're just beyond their normal lifespan. So the checklist. This has been normal. Everyone should be familiar with these books. This used to be every time you'd walk into an auto parts store. These used to be there used to be racks of them. I haven't seen them. Now, granted, go into the auto parts stores. Most of the stuff that I work on is weird and I have to order it. But yeah, these books and this list on the left, these haven't changed. These have all been the same. And some of it, after an hour-long conversation with someone on the phone, I found out, oh, I used an Elgin cam. I've been using Elgin cams my whole life. Why am I suddenly having an issue? Well, did you check that tolerance? Did you check that clearance? Oh, no, I didn't. Well, there's not much I can do about that. But there's other things, that are brand new, and that's what we've kind of already touched on with some of these authors, these folks, these integral kingpins of the industry, and just the progression of engine technology in general, is that you need to keep up to date on it, and you're not going to find it in a book. You're going to have to watch, learn, listen. There's a lot of good stuff out there that we've learned within the last few years, and a lot of people are learning to use their voice rather than trying to cram it all into a book. There's conversations like the ones that we're having here that are out there that are fabulous. Quick touch on China. We already kind of talked about that. Probably the only thing that I should probably reiterate is we haven't had issues. And if you think that if you're worried that you got an Elgin part that's not an Elgin, give me a call. I'll verify. I'll do my best to help you identify it, because there are a lot of counterfeits out there. The biggest piece of advice that I could have to you, to any user, is to buy your parts from a place that supports a lot of engine parts in general, not just Elgin, but a lot of engine parts in general. If you're getting a really good deal on a camshaft and they also sell T-shirts and lawnmower carburetors, don't buy it from them. It's probably not worth its weight in scrap at that point. Real quick, like I said, break-ins, that hasn't changed. The only thing that's kind of changed that I'll mention on this is that the guys that are doing recipe builds where they're building the same engine every time and they know it's going to start every time, they're doing 3 10-minute sessions instead of one long session. They're doing a 10-minute session, kill the engine, let it cool off completely, start it, bring it back up to temperature, run a do that break-in for another 10 minutes, cool it off, and then repeat, do a third. And some of them are reporting better break-in qualities. To take a lot of conversation, they're reporting better break-in, but it's got to start right away, because if it doesn't start, then you're looking at ring wash. You're losing all that lube, just a whole plethora of things, which leaves you back in the black and white days, what we're showing here, compared to today. Because like tens of millions of people have Elgin running in their engine with no issue, guaranteed. Like I said, OE supply directly to the assembly lines. You get in that brand new vehicle from the dealership, it has Elgin in the engine. Performance, dirt track, circle track, drag racing, all of it. I've been involved with all, but we're very fortunate in our area that we have a lot of this. I guess probably something I'm getting ahead of myself here. Sick Week was just along with LS Fest West Vegas, was in the top 10 by USA Today for motorsports events in the US. Indy, of course, was in there. Daytona, a few others were in there. One of the ones that was in there was Sick Week, and that's one of the ones that all of the guys from Hot Rod, Motor Trend, a lot of those TV streaming shows that have their YouTube influencers, they're all out there right now, right here in Northern Illinois. There's a bunch of tracks right here in the area that they're racing right now. 25 years ago, when I was in a machine shop, running 8s in the quarter mile was $100,000. 40 in the engine, 40 in the chassis, and 20 in the tow rig to get it to and from the track. Today, the sloppy mechanics, we're talking about the golden age of horsepower and the age of information. They're sharing all their information as to how they build vehicles. They put a vehicle into the 8s that'll pass a tech lane for $8,000 and change.
Wow.
$100,000 to $8,000. And now on top, they're with that same formula, slightly detuned, they're running in the 9s, getting 30 miles to the gallon, and they can take their kids to go get ice cream in it. It's that street reliable. These guys at Sick Week right here in our area, they're running in the 6s and driving it a couple hundred miles from track to track to track for a whole week. So this isn't like fairy tale. This is stuff that you can go right now and shake their hand at the racetrack, and these are normal people. Or you can stand in line at a trade show or an event, and you can meet them and talk to them about this, and they'll share it with you. And that's a lot about how we got to where we are today, 105 years later, is that we have made performance parts. Our parts are not the issue. We have parts out there right now performing that are doing thousands of horsepower and all that other stuff. But yeah, I guess that's probably the gist of it. If we could do one more minute. So like I said, Elgin, this is about us, 100 years. We started out, we're one family, one town, 105 years. A third of a million square foot factory, a couple hundred employees, engine and chassis parts. Raw steel comes in one end of the building. Finished product, boxed, glossy goes out. We have a full lab, certifications. We make parts for everyone. Aftermarket, we do a whole variety of stuff, as we've kind of talked about today. A lot of mostly valve train components, and a lot of somewhat cutting edge and improved stuff too. LS engine, of course, we talked a lot about that. Mechanical valve springs, diesels. We are the largest fully integrated push rod manufacturer in the world, the largest fully integrated stamped rocker arm manufacturer in this half of the world. Chassis, relevant to us, it's probably the kingpins, or I mean, the kingpins are relevant because every single semi truck out there, school bus, ambulance, whatever, that's that. But in the middle, the muscle cars, we do front end kits. Catalog, 30,000 part numbers, searchable, lots on there, good stuff, 24 hours a day available, totally free. We have fancy machines. We have people that know how to use the fancy machines and keep them in tune. Heat treat, that's probably worth speaking on just for just a second, because not a lot of people have that. This is all in-house. Those are, you're looking in the middle of the screen there, those are camshafts for an OE going into a heat treat oven, a batch one. Upper right, those are kingpins. Those are both going through induction. That would be the same way that a camshaft is done. Billet, a modern billet LS camshaft, or anything billet. And then lower right, that's a pizza oven the size of a pole barn, and those are push rods coming out of it. Grinding, like I said, a lot of stuff we know a lot about grinding. That's one of our biggest certifications. That's stuff that I know how to type but don't know how to speak on. But it's all the lab stuff. We can measure stuff in ways that most average machinists can't, and so that's why the OEs trust us to make stuff. And here's some of the machinery that does a lot of the good work, because a lot, every hundredth, whatever, there's a certain quantity of parts as they're coming off the lines have to be broken, and make sure that they break a certain way, and then measure it and make sure it broke the way that we all expect it to, that it's designed. So to the end, to recap, yes, there is an increase in failures due to China. There's no way to deny that. There is a lot of junk parts out there that are not going to last. If you find Elgin, make sure you're buying it from a retailer that supports the whole brand, because they are going to support the product after the sale. They're going to be able to fill you out with not just the Elgin valve train, but bearings, gaskets, everything else that you need for your build. And they understand what you're looking for. For the most part, if they're supporting the whole line, they know that product, versus other people might not know, anything about engine building whatsoever. So, and then of course, the biggest thing, the oil. Most people are not aware of the oil. So just use that good oil, follow all the steps that you know are correct, and you'll be successful. You'll be racing for another 100 years. We've been doing it for 105 years, and we intend to be supporting you for another 105 years. So how do we do? How do we do, Brad?
Fantastic presentation. And my gosh, when you bring up the oil, there are so many internet oil experts out there. It's mind-boggling, but just that API spec. And how important it is. And I love the way you, kind of throw in your acronyms. SN, no.
Yeah.
Just some simple things to remember, and some simple things to look for. And like you said, the SP spec, awesome. But that's a good thing. Which is funny, because there was a question that came in from the chat, and I'm almost thinking the answer to the question is just simply yes. Which is the culprit? Oil, material, lifter, cam lobe?
Yeah, well, everything we just kind of talked about, making sure that the oil is probably step one. If you're not aware of the oil, go back to the drawing board. You got to start over, because the chances are that the failure contaminated the rest of the system, and you're going to need to clean it out. You got to get those metal shavings out of there. And then going forward, use the right oil every time. The Elgin camshafts and lifters, we've not had an issue. I mean, these are, like I said, OE replacement, supply, quality, etc. Made in USA. The cams almost exclusively are made in USA, short of a couple that are import engines, and they have to be import because that's where they come from, but almost all of the rest of the performance cams in our catalog are all made in USA. And then, yeah, the machining is a big part. It needs to be measured. We can't do this by feel anymore. At the very beginning, looking at those guys in the street replacing the engine in their 57 Chevy Nomad, there wasn't a car newer than 69 in that picture. The Fiat in the background and the Camaro were both 69. That car was 12 years old. That engine was probably okay. It probably hadn't been beat on too bad, we can assume. And that's why engines were living back then and not living as much today, is that it's seen some miles. It's seen a lot of heat cycles. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah. You know what? There's a few follow-up questions to talk about with this
Sure.
too. You're talking about 70 years old, when we start looking at the Chevy small block. So people are doing the rebuilds, we all want what we had or what we dreamed of when we were young. So if I have a numbers matching muscle car, how can I be sure that that engine is going to survive after a rebuild?
Great question. Back to my Rambler, actually, is probably the best example to use, is that I do have my original block. That was the block I started with. That block was not perfect. Knowing what we know today, maybe I should go back and have another look at it. But 25 years ago, it was fatigued to the point where it seemed like it was probably in a very hot car fire, even though the car was numbers matching and never had an issue. Even though Rambler isn't necessarily numbers matching the same way that a Mopar would be, or whatever, or a GM product. But the long story short is, if that engine block has to live, then you're going to need to go through that machining process, that measuring process, not necessarily the machining. You need to verify that the engine block is something that is worth building, because if it is out by a little bit of here or there, that's where the failure is going to be rooted at. That's going to be the cause from it. So measuring it, spending an additional 40, 80 hours, measuring it all out, making sure that it seems like it's going to survive, and then using the right oil, using, products that are parts that are sourced here in the US from a quality manufacturer, are going to be your secrets to success, which shouldn't be a secret. It should be common sense, but don't build the engine by feel. If you can't do the machining, take it to a machinist that really knows what they're doing, and they can give you a blueprint. That's one of the things that off the cuff that I tell a lot of people is, if you go into an engine shop and there's just kind of engines laying on a dirty floor, all right, well, yeah, they probably know what they're doing. If there's engines on stands and the floor is polished, and on top of every engine is a little folder, and you open up the folder and every single spec, every single tolerance is printed out in there, the engine is blueprinted, and you can get that folder that says, this is my engine is built to this standard. Well, it is, or you should assume that it is. I would hate that they just copy and paste, but for the most part, building an engine by feel versus blueprinting an engine, worlds of difference between. So
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Scott, what if my engine was running just fine before just swapping the camshaft only?
Well, questions that come after that usually that I ask are, was it a 2-barrel car with 50 pounds of spring pressure, and now you increase the spring pressure, or was that engine never totally rebuilt and flushed? If those oil galleys are still full of sludge from 50, 70 years of being on the road, and then you put a modern detergent oil in there, it's back to game over, and that's going to be a big cause for failure.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of the modern detergent oil, and look, I will fully admit that I was guilty of this in my motorcycle, before talking to actual oil experts here on ePart Trade, and switching. Am I okay to run diesel oil in a flat tappet cam?
No, definitely not. The diesel did have a good amount of zinc in it, and when the diesel started, I was running Shell Rotella T, 15W40 and a 69 F250 that I bought for $400, and I drove for almost an entire decade with no issues whatsoever. This would have been right after the turn of this most recent century. Yeah, no problems. I had that, and then I have a little old man's 75 F100. Speaking from my own experience, as well as the feedback that I'm getting from production engineering manufacturers, is that we were all running 1540. we didn't have any issues because there was zinc in the oil. But then they switched to the ultra low sulfur, and we started having the sludge issues. And I did replace a couple sets of lifters in that F-250, and it didn't solve the problem. In the 75 F-100, the little old man's truck that ran like a sewing machine when I got it, it was starting to clatter. And that same spring that we did some research, we found out about the diesel oil, is that I switched to a pre-blended high zinc content oil designed for a flat tappet engine, and that truck went back to being whisper quiet. Night and day difference from running the correct oil. Twice to my Rambler and my F-100 from my own experience, let alone what I hear from engineers on this forum, on other webinars, everything out there, where these guys are talking and sharing the information. Oil is the biggest part. If you're running an off-the-shelf on-road oil, it's cooking oil. You have to run a pre-blended oil, or oil that has a good amount of zinc content in it, with a low to no detergent, is the only way we're seeing these things survive. And in my travels with my hobby, Model T Fords, that's what I'm mostly into, Model T Fords and horseless carriages. I do cross paths with a lot of people that have race cars, whether it be short track or a couple of my friends do the Road America is relatively near here, Blackhawk Farms, some of the other road courses and whatnot. And yeah, everyone agrees. If you have a flat tappet and you're wailing on it, yeah, you have to run a good oil. If you're driving it up to get ice cream twice a month, 10 blocks, and it's never coming up to temperature, yes, you could run cooking oil in it and you won't blow it up because you're never bringing it up to temperature. You're never putting it under load, hypothetically. But for guys that are really driving their vehicles, all of the feedback we've gotten recently is the zinc.
Mm-hmm. And finally, how about, speaking of oil, the debate between synthetic and mineral oil?
Oh yeah, probably kind of the best thing was the think about it would be the difference between that Indy car and those dirt bikes and the flathead. Is that there is no one oil for everything. There's not a universal oil. You do have more cost on the synthetic. Synthetics are come out through OE, through that development where they just turn the key, they never break it in, and they drive it away. For a cruise night car, do you need the expense? Probably not. A conventional mineral oil is going to be fine. You don't necessarily need that you're not bringing it up to high temperatures. You're not expecting all of that extra load out of it when you're just putzing around town. So they both work. It doesn't matter which one you choose, as long as it has the right, detergent package and zinc that's designed for a flat tappet camshaft and lifters.
Mm-hmm. A quick question here from the chat: if the camshaft is DLC coated, for instance, what type of oil should be used?
OEs don't like DLC yet. We have had them in here, and we've introduced them to it. We have that capability to do DLC. I'm imagining that what the person is asking is the ones that are out there that are going on a flat tappet. I'm not an engineer, but I'm a sales guy. And I do know a lot of warehouses and a lot of engine builders. And I have been keeping my finger on the pulse of how those have been doing within the last season and a half. And I don't have any definite positive feedback that it's going to be the answer. I don't have any negative per se. Some speculation is that it's too slippery. Some speculation is that there's too much buildup at the edge and it's going to be only riding on the edge and it's not going to be mating itself. You have to remember, the lifter mates itself to the camshaft with that zinc. That's what gives it the maximum amount of contact so that it does spin. The lifter does kind of need to spin in the bore for it to be working. To be going just up and down, that's roller. That's kind of a little bit different. So will it work? We'll find out. I've been leaning on some of the guys that are actually out there in circle track, and back to my like I said, 25 years ago when I raced the equivalent of a Chevy Nova, it was a Pontiac Phoenix on a dirt track. There was a lot of secrets out there, and with the DLC, there's a lot of secrets out there today too. I don't think anyone wants to share. At least I don't have that feedback yet. So I'm sorry I don't have an answer for what oil to use, because I'm not an engineer.
That's fair enough. Well, speaking of, we have some really good ones who are frequent guests here on eParts, right?
Sure.
about one of them yesterday in Lake Speed Junior, and with what they do with Total Seal, some amazing oil videos and different things like that. Scott, what a great education here today, though. An amazing presentation, too. I love the PowerPoint you put together because I do think it answers a lot of questions, or if nothing else, at least highlights to people some of the things that they should be thinking about when they're working on engines and the things that they're doing.
Cool. Thank you for having me. I'm glad it went smoothly.
Yeah, this is awesome. Francis, Judy?
Thank you, Scott. Great to have you on again, as always. This webinar has been recorded. It will be posted later on the ePortrait platform, distributed through our newsletter and social media channel. We pushed Elgin's product back on the homepage of the ePortrait platform. For more information and updates, please visit www.eportrait.com. Next webinar will be on electronic fuel injection throttle bodies, and we're going to be traveling to the UK to talk with Genve Dynamics. Thank you very much once again, and goodbye.
ePortrait is a digital platform that we've created basically to make life easier in the business community of auto racing.
ePortrait, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier.
When you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information, and then from there it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
ePortrait really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
Land speed record holder George Poteet's Speed Demon rocketed 481 miles per hour at the Bonneville Salt Flats. You don't go that fast without ARP fasteners.
There is no way that we could go the speed that we've gone, the number of times we've gone, with a lesser quality bolt than ARP supplies to us. And we absolutely wouldn't be where we were today if it weren't for ARP.
When failure is not an option, it's ARP-bolts.com.
We're Performance Plus Global Logistics. Our team of dedicated performance industry and logistics experts get valuable cars and components to the track on time in top condition. We provide expedited logistics solutions for the performance industry using direct routes instead of deferred options, and communicate all necessary information to the appropriate resources to meet regulations and ensure a smooth transit and secure delivery, both domestically and internationally. And we exceed customer expectations by providing best-in-class service with an efficient and cost-effective system in place. Contact us today to book your next shipment.
You work as hard as your truck, and you have no time for downtime. That's why more truck owners trust Blue Def, America's #1 diesel exhaust fluid brand. Each batch is guaranteed pure, so you can avoid costly repairs caused by inferior DEF. Demand America's best for your truck. Blue Def and Blue Def Platinum. Put trust in your truck.
Where will you find Farea racing components? Circle track, drag racing, and any top race shop. In every form of motorsports competition, our valves and valve train components deliver race-proven design and technology. And we've brought that same performance to our street applications as well. We're backed by 5 decades of experience, an extensive range of off-the-shelf components, and our custom valve department has the fastest turnaround times in the industry. Farea Racing Components. Stand with us or race against us.
Scribner Plastics has provided professional strength shipping containers to the automotive and performance industry for over 40 years. We have containers that will fit most any configuration of complete or partial engines and transmissions. Today we highlight part number 5148 cylinder head shipping and storage container. Base has double-walled durable construction featuring a cinch strap with an abrasion sleeve that securely fits your small block, big block, and pro stock heads to the base at all times. Talk to your dealers and distributors about the shipping storage container for cylinder heads from Scrimmer Plastics, part number 5148.